Chapter 2013. Dead Silence. The atmosphere became even colder. Emo Shurqian moved his fingertips. A young man flew up. "What's his name?" Emo Shurqian asked. The young man's face was pale as he shook his head in panic. "I don't know." Bang. As soon as he finished speaking, there was an explosion. It was the young man's body that suddenly exploded. Without any warning. It was extremely violent. He didn't even have time to beg for mercy or cry out in pain before he died. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. It was a shocking sight. This sudden scene caused everyone's hearts to tremble violently. Many people's expressions changed. Chu Luiyue also frowned. She knew that Emo Shurqian had always been ruthless. But she didn't expect him to be so. A scream was heard. He Xilan was suddenly caught by Emo Shurqian. "What's his name?" Emo Shurqian continued to ask. Obviously, he was just randomly picking someone to ask. If she answered that she didn't know or didn't say anything, she would probably die. He Xilan's face was as pale as a ghost. When had she ever encountered such a scene? Thinking of the miserable death of the young man just now, she was so scared that her teeth were chattering. Who was that golden-haired young man? What was his background? She really didn't know. Ziji's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his face was filled with despair. This time, he was afraid. Changwanzhou. At this moment, a clear and calm voice suddenly came from behind the crowd. Everyone looked over, but they were all stunned. The person who spoke was an ordinary-looking young woman. At this moment, she was looking up at the sky. "He's from the Tianling dynasty." Ziji opened his mouth and looked at Chu Luiyue in disbelief. She knew. She actually knew? Then what was her identity? Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, causing Ziji to fall into deep confusion. The next moment, Xilan's body suddenly flew backward. Ziji hurried forward and barely caught her. The powerful impact made Ziji fall heavily to the ground. The sound of bones breaking was heard. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Xilan's situation wasn't any better. Both of them were in a sorry state. But even so, he still managed to keep his life. Some people looked at Chu Luiyue with undisguised anger. Obviously, in their eyes, Chu Luiyue had betrayed Changwanzhou by taking the initiative to answer. However, Chu Luiyue turned a blind eye to these gazes. She had her own plans. Emo Shurqian turned his gaze to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue lowered his eyes slightly. "Come here," Emo Shurqian said. Chu Luiyue walked forward. The others stared at her. Although they had different thoughts, they were afraid of Emo Shurqian and did not dare to say anything at this moment. Rong Xiu did not follow. In this almost suffocating atmosphere, Chu Luiyue walked to the front of the crowd. "I said, come here." Emo Shurqian's hoarse and deep voice sounded like a death knell. Chu Luiyue seemed to hesitate for a moment before finally moving forward. In the end, she walked up to Emo Shurqian step by step. There were only 10 steps between the two of them. Beside her was Changwanzhou. Changwanzhou turned his head and glanced at her indifferently. That gaze was extremely unfamiliar. It was cold and heavy, and it even carried a trace of extremely faint anger. He didn't seem to understand why this person had exposed his identity. Chu Luiyue didn't seem to notice his gaze and bowed to Emo Shurqian. Emo Shurqian asked, "Do you know him?" Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes. Emo Shurqian was a little interested. Someone from the Tianling dynasty? No wonder. Wasn't that person from the Tianling dynasty? He sized up Changwanzhou again. "I know that she has the 13 Yu guards by her side, and recently, she brought a few of them to the Divine Ruins world. All of them are doing well and are famous. I remember that there's no one like you among the 13 Yu guards, right?" Previously, he had spent a lot of effort investigating Chu Luiyue and was quite familiar with the 13 Yu guards. He didn't have any impression of the name Changwanzhou. Changwanzhou pursed his lips tightly, still uncooperative. Emo Shurqian didn't care and turned to look at Chu Luiyue. "You said you know him, then, who are you?" Changwanzhou's identity was not simple. Those who knew his name and background should not be ordinary people. Emo Shurqian's scrutinizing gaze enveloped Chu Luiyue. She smiled slightly. Because of this smile, that ordinary face suddenly had a different kind of elegance. A pair of black jade-like eyes were filled with fine starlight. Mo Shiqian suddenly felt that something was wrong. At this moment, a ball of reddish-gold flames suddenly burst out from her body. A shocking and terrifying pressure spread crazily towards the surroundings. Under the flames, a beautiful and thin soft armor quickly covered her entire body. Swoosh! A snow-white longsword pierced through the air. A clear shout suddenly spread far and wide between the heavens and the earth. Puma, Mo Shiqian, you should know best. Before she finished speaking, Chu Liyue's figure had already disappeared from the spot. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Everyone only saw a piercing sword light wrapped in reddish-gold flames cross the sky and charge straight at Mo Shiqian. Mo Shiqian roared in shock and anger. Shangguan Yu? Shangguan Yu? Hearing this name, everyone present was shocked. Wasn't that the princess of the Tianling dynasty? The rumored one who had already entered the divine ruins world? Why did she suddenly appear here? He Ziji and He Xilan looked at each other and saw the deep shock in each other's eyes. So that woman was Shangguan Yu? That meant... Before they could figure it out, Rong Xiu's figure had disappeared without a trace. The next moment, he suddenly appeared behind Mo Shiqian. His thin scarlet lips curled up slightly as if he was smiling, but there was a hint of coldness at the corners of his eyes. Mo Shiqian, how have you been? As early as when Chu Liyue started to make a move, Mo Shiqian had already expected that Rong Xiu would be here too. He was about to turn around when an extremely cold aura came towards him. Mo Shiqian's heart sank. Previously, he already knew what happened at Peach Blossom Dock. He also knew that Yi Wentao had been defeated by Chu Liyue. But at that time, he had thought that Chu Liyue had used some tricks to finally win that bet. But now, facing Chu Liyue's attack, he suddenly realized. This woman's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. Almost at the same time, Chang Wanzhou suddenly moved. A shocking aura erupted from his body. Mo Shiqian was even more shocked and furious. Exalted goddess? He had not noticed it at all before. In the blink of an eye, the three of them had surrounded Mo Shiqian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2014. Moreover, one of them was a venerable god and the other two were exalted gods. Under normal circumstances, even if 3 venerable gods fought him at the same time, he would definitely win. However, among the 3 of them, apart from Chang Wanzhou, one was Chu Liyue and the other was Rong Xiu. These 2 people were not easy to deal with. In a flash, Chu Liyue's sword aura had already landed. Mo Shiqian could not dodge and could only choose to fight head-on. With a flick of his wrist, the black mist around him quickly condensed into a long saber. The long saber was solid and suffused with a dark light. There was a faint scarlet color on it, as if it was outlining some kind of pattern. Clang. The 2 of them fought in close combat. Swish, the sharp sound of weapons scraping could be heard. Flames splattered everywhere. The powerful force made Chu Liyue's hand go numb. She focused her eyes and saw that the pattern on Mo Shiqian's long saber was the totem of the Black Demon Cave. I was thinking of what method to use to lure you out of Peach Blossom Dock. I didn't expect you to come by yourself. Mo Shiqian smiled coldly and swung his saber. When he moved, the surrounding space quickly distorted. Chu Liyue did not want to fight. When Mo Shiqian's long saber was about to swing over, she used the force to retreat. Swish! A black spatial crack tore open in front of Chu Liyue. Her eyes were cold, and the reddish-gold flames quickly turned into a huge reddish-gold phoenix. Chu Liyue leaped onto Dumpling's back. Whoosh! Dumpling flapped her wings and flew up. Chu Liyue's mind raced. She had just wanted to test Mo Shiqian's strength. He was a venerable god. And he had reached the absolute peak. Chu Liyue had fought with Yi Wentao before. In the Divine Ruins world, Yi Wentao was already publicly recognized as one of the best among the supreme gods. And Mo Shiqian in front of him was much stronger than him. With her own strength, she was definitely not a match for him. She had used 80% of her strength in that attack, But she hadn't hurt Mo Shurqian at all. That day, she was able to beat Yi Wentao because she had the advantage of time, place, and people, but today was different. This was Mo Shurqian's territory. Just as Mo Shurqian was about to chase after her, a cold wind suddenly came from behind. He knew something was wrong and immediately turned around. An extremely thin golden thread quickly flew over and wrapped around the long saber in his hand. Clang. Rong Xiu pulled his wrist, and the golden thread immediately tightened. Mo Shurqian knew Rong Xiu's strength. Seeing this, he let go of his hand without hesitation and threw the long saber out. Bang! A violent explosion was heard. It was Rong Xiu's finger pressing on the golden thread, and he suddenly moved it. The golden thread trembled, and the long saber connected to it was instantly reduced to dust by a terrifying force. The battle in the sky erupted fiercely. The onlookers were all shocked on the spot. At this moment, Do Min's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing that the people over there had already started fighting, he immediately shouted sternly, "Everyone listen up. Attack immediately and take down these 3 people." With that, he took the lead and rushed over. Although the sect leader was powerful, he couldn't justify being besieged in his own territory. However, before he arrived, Rong Xiu waved his sleeve. Boom! The golden flames were like a torrent, gushing out endlessly, forming a huge golden barrier in the sky, encircling the few of them. Do Min was immediately isolated. The golden flames were resplendent and tightly blocked everyone's vision. Do Min crossed his hands in front of him. A Xian formation quickly gathered in front of him. A deep tiger's roar instantly reverberated through the air. However, before he could make a move, a clear phoenix cry came from within the barrier. Bang! The powerful bloodline pressure from the ancient divine beast immediately suppressed the tiger roar above the Xian formation. The illusion that was forming also shattered with a loud bang. When Do Min heard the phoenix cry, he knew that something was wrong. However, before he could retreat, the Xian formation had already collapsed in front of him. His face paled, and the thick smell of blood instantly surged up his throat. Crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Hong Yin exclaimed in shock. Even though they were outside and couldn't see what was going on inside, they still saw it clearly when the crimson gold heavenly phoenix appeared. He Ziji and the others standing below didn't know what happened in the divine ruins world. It was normal for them to be shocked when they saw this scene. However, these things, they knew. Do Min was also filled with regret. He only wanted to atone for his mistake by meritorious service, but he forgot that Chu Luiwei wasn't easy to deal with. The one she contracted was not only a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, but it was also the young master of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan. She could defeat Yi Wentao, so her strength naturally couldn't be underestimated. The scorching hot temperature came from the barrier, causing Do Min to be even more frightened. He tried a few more times, but he realized that it was difficult to even get close to the barrier, let alone open it. At this moment, people rushed over one after another and surrounded the huge barrier. However, they were completely helpless against the spirit formation. "What should we do?" someone asked. Do Min's brows were tightly knitted. "Everyone be on guard. Seal all the barriers. Don't allow anyone to enter or leave. Once they come out, immediately attack." He originally thought of everyone joining forces to forcefully break the barrier from the outside. However, after thinking about it carefully, he realized that this method wouldn't work at all. After all, the sect master was still inside. If they were slightly careless, he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Now, they could only hope that the sect master could come out first. "Hall Master Do Min, what about those people?" Hong Yin turned around to take a look, and some impatience appeared on his face. "Lock them all up first." At this time, who still had the mood to think about these people? In the Black Demon Cave, other than Mo Shurqian, who was the sect master, the ones with the most authority were the few hall masters. When the incident happened, Do Min happened to be present, so everyone subconsciously respected him. Although there were some problems before, compared to the current situation, it was not worth mentioning. Almost no one cared. Therefore, under Do Min's command, the entire Black Demon Cave quickly became alert. Everyone used the space formed by the huge golden barrier as the center, layer by layer, and waited. Hallmaster Do Min, the sect master, is fighting 1 against 3. Will he be fine? Everyone was still a little worried about this. Especially since Rong Xiu is also here. The person who spoke lowered his voice. Do Min's expression was also a little solemn. Others were fine, but Rong Xiu, he was a real killing god. A few years ago, countless people in the Black Demon Cave had died at his hands. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2015. Things are different now. The sect master's strength has increased greatly. They can't hurt him easily. Do Min hesitated for a moment before speaking in a low voice. Moreover, don't forget where we are. This is the territory of the Black Demon Cave. How can anyone be so presumptuous? The reason why they suffered a huge loss at Rong Xiu's hands a few years ago was that the sect master was in seclusion at that time and couldn't take any action. On the other hand, they were caught off guard and weren't prepared. But it was different now. The sect master could fight, and they had the relevant experience. This time, that kind of thing would not happen again. Hearing his words, everyone nodded and looked at the golden boundary. They began a long and torturous wait. Inside the boundary, Mo Shiqian glanced at the long saber that had turned into powder in an instant. His eyes were cold. Rong Xiu's strength was obviously stronger than before. You guys have hidden yourselves well. I have really underestimated you guys. Mo Shiqian's voice was filled with anger. He had felt that something was wrong before, but he did not think too much about it. Because he did not expect that the two of them would really come here directly. For the past few years, he and the entire Black Demon Cave had been hiding here and had never been exposed. He knew that Rong Xiu had used many methods to investigate, but they were all in vain. Who knew? Mo Shiqian suddenly thought of something and his heart sank. You broke through the Peach Blossom Docks Gate realm? Other than this, he could not think of any other possibility. Chu Luiwen narrowed his eyes. There was indeed something wrong with the Gate realm. And it had something to do with Mo Shiqian. Peach Blossom Dock is already mine. Mo Shiqian, what's the point of asking these questions? Chu Liwei said slowly. On the day your Black Sword sect was completely annihilated, you should have expected this day to come. Mo Shiqian sneered. After occupying Peach Blossom Dock and defeating Yiwen Tao, you are indeed more confident in your words. After those things happened, he was indeed quite shocked. But he was busy at that time, so he put these things aside for the time being. Who would have thought that in such a short period of time, they would actually kill their way here? You dare to come here directly? You sure have guts? That's what you said the last time I charged into the Black Demon Cave. Rong Xiu suddenly opened his mouth. His tone was lazy and his expression was undisciplined. Mo Shiqian, you can change your line. Mo Shiqian was furious. However, he could not refute Rong Xiu's words. Last time, he had indeed suffered a great loss at the hands of Rong Xiu. Suddenly, a figure came closer. Chu Luiwei turned his gaze to Chang Wanzhou. At this moment, the injuries on his body were almost completely healed. He looked dispirited and listless before, but in the blink of an eye, he seemed to have become a completely different person. He was already a high god. Even Chu Luiwei was surprised by this. Outside the Divine Ruins world, wanting to break through this layer of shackles was not easy. She asked softly, Little Zhou, when did you break through to High God? Chang Wanzhou looked at her. His exquisite and beautiful face was still stained with blood. A moment of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Swish. The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came. Chu Luiwei suddenly looked up and his pupils constricted. The black mist on Mo Shiqian's body suddenly began to surge rapidly. A cold and bloody aura kept spreading. Then, two more figures appeared behind Mo Shiqian. There were two people who looked exactly like him. Thousand Shadows' divine body. Digression, Con, sort out the outline and adjust the update time. Starting at noon tomorrow, the update will start at 5 o'clock. Mobile users, Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2016. The Thousand Shadows Divine Body was a legendary and extremely powerful divine body cultivation method. It was rumored that this divine body had been lost for a long time. Even Chu Luiyue, who had read countless related materials in Lingxiao College, had only vaguely heard of this name. As for the specific method of cultivation, she did not know. She did not expect to encounter it here today. Looking at the three identical figures, Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed slightly. The Thousand Shadows divine body was powerful because the cultivator could refine more than one divine body. As one's own strength increased, the number of divine bodies one could possess would also increase. It was undoubtedly a great advantage when fighting with others. More importantly, the divine bodies that were cultivated possessed the same strength as the cultivator himself. In other words, the current situation was equivalent to three Mo Shiqians fighting against the three of them. The advantage of 3 against 1 was instantly disintegrated. When the three Mo Shiqians stood on the spot at the same time, the thick layer of black fog also divided into 3 parts and surrounded each of them. The black fog seemed to have thinned a little, but Mo Shiqian's face could not be seen clearly. However, even so, Chu Luiyue could still feel the cold and sinister eyes staring at her. "It's good that you're here. I want to see how powerful Peach Blossom Doc's Lord Yu is now." As Mo Shiqian spoke, he dashed towards Chu Luiyue. However, as soon as he moved, a golden thread instantly flew toward him. Mo Shiqian's eyes sharpened and he immediately dodged. In just a moment, Rong Xiu had already appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. His snow-white robe fluttered in the wind. There seemed to be a smile on his incomparably noble face, but his deep and cold eyes were filled with bone-chilling coldness. "Mo Shiqian, your opponent, is me." With that, Rong Xiu raised his hand and golden flames gushed out from his palm. Although the two divine bodies that appeared had the same strength as Mo Shiqian, only by killing the real Mo Shiqian could it be considered a complete end. Mo Shiqian gritted his teeth. Originally, he wanted to make a move on Chu Luiyue. However, with Rong Xiu's protection, there was no way he could do anything for the time being. Unless he could get rid of Rong Xiu first. Good. Since that's the case, let's settle the old and new scores together. As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Shiqian's aura soared again. He waved his arm, and a black and red scythe appeared in his hand. Chu Luiyue recognized at a glance that this was not the long saber from before. It was condensed from the strange black fog around him. This was a real divine artifact. Furthermore, the pressure on it was extremely strong. Suddenly, a white light flashed in Chu Luiyue's mind. This was not a venerable artifact. This was a real, sacred artifact. 9 Nether Scythe. Mo Shiqian raised the sickle in his hand. In an instant, a cold and gloomy killing intent quickly spread out from within. A thin layer of blood-red frost quickly covered it. The sickle fell, and a sea of blood surged. Rong Xiu waved his sleeve, and the golden flame flew out quickly. Boom! 2 strong and bright colors instantly collided in midair and exploded. On the other side, Mo Shiqian's divine bodies also began to move separately. One went straight to Chang Wanzhou, while the other jumped from the side and came behind Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue quickly turned around. She frowned slightly and then put away the red cloud sword. Standing opposite her, Mo Shiqian frowned and then seemed to show a strange smile. His laughter was hoarse and low. "It seems that you're quite prepared." Even his voice and tone were no different from the real Mo Shiqian. Chu Luiyue raised her vigilance to the highest. From a certain perspective, this was equivalent to fighting with Mo Shiqian. Mo Shiqian's strength was obviously above Yi Wentao's. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to defeat him. However, Chu Luiyue did not expect to win this battle. What she needed to do now was to stall for time. The flowing cloud-flying diagram flew out of her hand. The red scroll was unfolded, and Chu Luiyue's fair and slender hand quickly skimmed over it. Soon, several Xian formations appeared in front of her one after another. Seeing this scene, A trace of surprise finally flashed across Mo Shiqian's eyes. He knew that Nan Yifan had died in Peach Blossom Dock not long ago, and that the flowing cloud flying diagram had fallen into Chu Liyue's hands and become her possession. However, before Chu Liyue became the owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram, the flowing cloud flying diagram had never displayed its true combat power in the past 1,000 years. Therefore, it was the first time Mo Shiqian had seen such a scene. The flowing cloud flying diagram, you're using it well. It was obviously impossible to say that he was unperturbed. Back then, he had the chance to obtain this thing. Unfortunately, like the rest of the world, he thought that the flowing cloud flying diagram was only a sacred artifact for escaping, so he didn't take it to heart. Now that he thought about it, however, Mo Shiqian also understood that artifacts of this level actually had spiritual energy. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted for such a long time before displaying its true power in Chu Liyue's hands. A cold smile appeared on Chu Liyue's lips. You flatter me. With a thought, the Shen formations quickly flew forward and surrounded Mo Shiqian. On the other side, Chang Wanzhou had already started fighting with Mo Shiqian's Thousand Shadows divine body. To be fair, an exalted god like Chang Wanzhou was definitely no match for Mo Shiqian. Even Chang Wanzhou himself admitted this. Therefore, from the moment the two of them started fighting, Chang Wanzhou had already decided not to fight Mo Shiqian head-on. When the scene was in chaos earlier, Mo Shiqian had casually thrown the Cloud Sky Copper Sword out, and he had quickly snatched it back. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou was holding the Cloud Sky Copper Sword and only chose to attack from the side. Although he was not as strong as Mo Shiqian, he was agile. Every time Mo Shiqian planned to kill him, Chang Wanzhou would escape first. The two of them fell into an anxious battle. Time ticked by second. The golden barrier was extremely tight, so much so that no one outside could see what was happening inside. Not even a sound could be heard. Gradually, the people who were waiting started to feel restless and uneasy. I wonder what's going on inside. Sect Master is at a disadvantage fighting the three of them. That might not be the case. Sect Master has just come out of seclusion and his strength has increased greatly. He might not lose to them. That's right. Besides, don't forget that Sect Master cultivates the Thousand Shadows divine body. Even if the three of them join forces, they might not be able to gain any advantage from Sect Master. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2017. At the mention of this, everyone's restless hearts finally calmed down. Ever since they suffered a great loss at the hands of Rong Xiu a few years ago, the entire Black Demon Cave had been recuperating. The sect leader had been cultivating in seclusion all year round, and his strength had greatly increased. Now that they were facing each other again, it was still unknown who would win. Family. The remote and quiet courtyard was deserted and cheerless. Only one elder stood in front of the door, guarding it out of boredom. Ever since Yi Wentao returned, he had been staying in this room and had never come out. The other members of the family Yi had not come either. Of course, except for Jun Jiuqing, who was now the family head. However, he had only come once. The entire family Yi seemed to have forgotten that Yi Wentao was here. No one came here, and it was very quiet. No one would have thought that Yi Wentao, who had dominated the family Yi for hundreds of years, would end up like this. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking came from inside. The elder on guard frowned and went forward to ask, "What's wrong, family head?" After many years of habit, he still called Yi Wentao family head. However, they all understood that this word was meaningless to the current Yi Wentao. "It's fine. I hit the corner of the table and broke a cup." After a moment, Yi Wentao's somewhat suppressed and cold voice was heard. The elder on guard nodded in understanding. "Please be careful." He had no intention of going in to clean up. He was the only one in charge of guarding the entire courtyard. If nothing important happened, he would not leave his position at will. Besides, breaking a cup was indeed a small matter. After saying that, he looked away. Inside the room, Yi Wentao sat on a chair. On the ground in front of him was the table that he had just kicked over. The tea stains were scattered all over the floor, and the teacup was broken. Beside him, a man in black knelt. Yi Wentao's chest rose and fell violently, and his eyes seemed to be burning with anger. It was obvious how angry he was at this moment. Can't contact him? What is the meaning of this? He lowered his voice, but it was not difficult to hear the strong anger in his words. The black-clothed man still kept his head down. We've already sent 3 messages in a row, but there's still no reply from the other side. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and closed his eyes. In fact, he had long understood the meaning of these words. He just didn't want to believe it. Was the Black Demon Cave planning to ignore him? Yi Wentao tried his best to calm the surging emotions in his heart, but it was very difficult. The Black Demon Cave was his last hope. A few days ago, Jun Jiuqing came over and asked him the same question. At that time, he seemed to have compromised and told him everything about the armillary shield, but in fact, he hated Jun Jiuqing to the core. From his point of view, Jun Jiuqing had the ambition of a wolf. He had long planned to take over the position of the family head. While he was trapped in the Peach Blossom Cove, he forcefully took action and easily became the new head of the family Yi. Now, Jun Jiuqing was high and mighty, but what about him? He had been reduced to such a state that he could not even freely enter and leave this courtyard. Yes, Jun Jiuqing was the successor that he had personally selected, but at that time, how could he have known that Jun Jiuqing was such a person? He could only blame himself for being blinded. He had actually been fooled. To think that he had personally handed the token to Jun Jiuqing, thinking about it now, it was extremely ironic. Of course, Yi Wentao was not going to sit still and wait for death. Therefore, after a few years of hibernation, he finally contacted his loyalists again. Of course, he had his ways. The black-clothed man in front of him was one of them. What Jun Jiuqing wanted was actually very simple. He wanted to regain everything that he had lost, to restore his strength and retake the family. However, it was easier said than done. No matter which of these two things, to the current him, it was almost impossible for him to accomplish them. Therefore, from the beginning, he wanted to rely on external forces. This external force was naturally the Black Demon Cave. In the past few years, in order to avoid Rong Xiu's investigation, he had been very careful and had cut off contact with his loyalists. Until this time, there was really no other way. Moreover, he had already fallen out with Rong Xiu. Even if he knew about this, there was nothing to be afraid of. Now that he had nothing, what was there to be afraid of? But he did not expect that his desperate gamble of summoning loyalists and asking them to contact the Black Demon Cave would result in such a result. Obviously, without the help of that person, he would never be able to turn the tables. That was why Yi Wentao was so flustered and exasperated. When Rong Xiu attacked the Black Demon Cave, if I had not sent several loyalists to help, how could they have had time to leave so smoothly? Now they have turned against me. As he spoke, Yi Wentao coughed again. His face was still very pale, and there was a bloody and sweet taste in his mouth. Seeing this, the black-clothed man kneeling below asked worriedly, "Master, your body..." Yi Wentao shook his head. "I'm already recovering. I'll be fine after a while." His voice still sounded a little weak. The previous battle had exhausted him too much. The few days when he was locked up in Peach Blossom Dock were even more devastating. If not for his good foundation, he would not have been able to hold on. Contact him again. The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment. "Master, could it be that something has happened on the other side as well?" Yi Wentao frowned. "What?" "I personally think that even if the other side does not want to help, they would at least let me know and would not be so unresponsive. Also, that person should know about the current situation of Family Yi and the Nan family, but until now, they have not done anything. This, don't you think it's strange?" Yi Wentao did not think so at first, but after hearing what he said, he instantly felt that something was wrong. He stood up and paced around the room, frowning and thinking for a long time. That's right. Both the Nan family and Family Yi were in trouble. That person would definitely not be indifferent. After all, he was the one standing behind these two families. Now, he and Nan Yifan had been defeated. To a certain extent, it was also a humiliation to that person. How could he tolerate it? Perhaps that person is still in seclusion? In the past few years, Yi Wentao had rarely contacted that person. He only knew that he spent most of his time in seclusion cultivating. No, if that's the case, the people below would not be indifferent. Yi Wentao suddenly stood still and opened his eyes wide. I'm afraid that something has really happened in Black Demon Cave. He turned his mind and looked at the black-clothed man. Have you been noticed by anyone recently when you came? The black-clothed man immediately said, No, I've always been cautious and did not dare to make the slightest mistake. Yi Wentao was still worried. He paused and asked again, What's the situation at Peach Blossom Dock in Yuntian Tower? The black-clothed man shook his head. It seems that everything is normal. I haven't heard any news recently. Yi Wentao's heart suddenly sank. Something has happened. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2018. At this moment, familiar footsteps came from outside. Yi Wentao was shocked. The elder in charge of guarding the door had already spoken. Greetings, master. Jun Jiuqing. Why is he here all of a sudden? Yi Wentao frowned and immediately turned around to give the man in black a look. The figure of the black-clothed person flashed and disappeared on the spot. Jun Jiuqing's voice was as casual as ever. I haven't been here for a few days and missed you. I thought I'd drop by to take a look. At this moment, he had already walked to the door and looked inside. How's the situation? The elder hurriedly said. Everything is normal. It's just that master seems to be in a bad mood today. Jun Jiuqing smiled. Is that so? All the more reason to go in and take a look. With that, he pushed the door open and entered. The room was very quiet, and there was a faint bitter medicinal fragrance. Although Jun Jiuqing hadn't been here for a few days, he had always sent people to deliver medicine. He walked in and saw Yi Wentao. And the mess on the floor. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows. You're really angry. What's wrong? Are the servants not serving you well enough? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. Serve? During this period, he had been locked up here like a prisoner. How could anyone serve him? It was more like surveillance. Yi Wentao looked up and asked coldly. What are you doing here today? I've already told you everything that needs to be said the other day. His face was full of annoyance, and he was just short of chasing him away. Jun Jiuqing didn't care and smiled faintly. Nothing. I heard that you had a guest, so I thought I'd come to take a look. Yi Wentao's heart thumped hard. However, he was an old fox after all. He didn't show any guilt on his face. Instead, he laughed sarcastically. What did you say? Guest? I don't have anyone here other than you. Guest, where did you come from? Jun Jiuqing looked around. The air in the room seemed to have frozen. Patriarch, why do you have to do this? After a long while, Jun Jiuqing finally spoke. Thanks to your grace, I was able to become the young lord and ascend to the position of patriarch. If you continue to stay here like this, I guarantee that you will be able to spend the rest of your days in peace. Unfortunately, you don't seem to care about this. Yi Wentao said coldly. I don't know what you're talking about. For the past few days, I've been wondering how you managed to get in touch with that person. Jun Jiuqing suddenly interrupted his words, and there was a strange smile on his devilishly handsome face. Although Family Yi's family business is big, you're dealing with them as an individual. The rest of the family Yi knew nothing about this. Under such circumstances, what did you use to persuade the other party to join hands with you? Yi Wentao's throat went dry as he stared at Jun Jiuqing. What are you trying to say? Jun Jiuqing smiled and shook his head. You should know best what I'm trying to say. For the past few days, I've been thinking about it day and night, and I finally remembered something. He took a step forward. Yi Wentao didn't know why, but his legs suddenly went weak and he unconsciously took a step back. The two confronted each other. Jun Jiuqing's aura easily crushed Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao secretly regretted it. This retreat was a sign of guilt. Jun Jiuqing continued. I remember that a few years ago, when Rong Xiu went to the Black Demon Cave, that person was at a critical juncture of his cultivation and had almost no combat power. With Rong Xiu's temperament, if he could completely kill the other party, he would definitely not leave the slightest chance of survival. But that time, the Black Demon Cave actually escaped and found another place to go. This meant that although Rong Xiu caused serious damage to the Black Demon Cave that time, he did not really threaten the other party's foundation. With every word Jun Jiuqing said, Yi Wentao felt more pressure in his heart. Seeing that he was silent, Jun Jiuqing asked softly, "Don't you think someone helped you?" Bang! Yi Wentao took a step back and accidentally knocked over the chair behind him. The high-quality rosewood chair fell to the ground with a dull thud. "Master, what's wrong?" The elder outside the door heard the sound and quickly knocked on the door to inquire. Jun Jiuqing said lightly, "It's nothing. You don't have to come in." The elder was also a smart person. When he heard this, he immediately responded and obediently continued to guard the door. The room fell into a short period of dead silence. "It seems that what I said was true?" Jun Jiuqing laughed. Although it was a question, his tone was very certain. "I didn't." Yi Wentao opened his mouth and wanted to deny it, but Jun Jiuqing's words made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. "Don't you find it strange that after so long, no one has come to receive you? Even the news you sent out was not responded to?" Yi Wentao suddenly felt a chill in his heart, causing his whole body to turn cold. You? He widened his eyes and looked at Jun Jiuqing in disbelief. "Jun Jiuqing, knew. I heard that those were the talents that you carefully nurtured for several years and spent a lot of time and effort on. What a pity." Yi Wentao's heart was in a perilous situation. Jun Jiuqing suddenly tilted his head and looked at the void behind Yi Wentao. Then, with a flick of his wrist, a vigorous force transformed into a long whip and suddenly flew out. Smith. The void was forcefully cut open, and the man in black who had just been hiding was directly pulled out. His neck was tightly bound by the long whip, and he could not break free. Seeing this, Yi Wentao's usual calm facade could no longer be maintained. "You knew all along." Jun Jiuqing did not say anything and exerted force. Crack! The crisp sound of bones cracking was heard. Finally, the man in black's neck tilted, and he stopped breathing. He was not weak, but Jun Jiuqing struck first and did not give him any chance to breathe. That was why he died. The man in black lay on the ground, and thick red blood slowly flowed out from under his body. The thick smell of blood quickly spread out. Yi Wentao's lips trembled, and his face was pale. At this point, what was there to not understand? "It's not that I knew all along." Jun Jiuqing looked up and glanced at Yi Wentao. "You can't hide it, so isn't it normal for others to know?" Previously, he only had his suspicions and did not have any evidence. However, he knew that Yi Wentao would definitely not let the matter rest, so during this period of time, he had been sending people to secretly keep an eye on him. Sure enough, he found something. There was no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. Besides, Jun Jiuqing was already prepared and was waiting for him to walk into the trap. Yi Wentao trembled all over, and there seemed to be a fire burning in his chest, but his body was still cold to the bone. He knew that this time he was really finished. "How do you know so much?" "About Black Demon Cave, about that person, about everything." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2019. At first, he hadn't noticed, but now he remembered that Jun Jiuqing's words were very strange. Not many people knew that Rong Xiu had gone to the Black Demon Cave. Most people in the entire Divine Ruins world thought that the Black Demon Cave had suddenly chosen to hide from the world and disappeared without a trace. There were very few people who knew what had happened at that time. Not only did Jun Jiuqing know, but he also knew very well. He even knew that the person in the Black Demon Cave was at a critical moment and couldn't make a move. This matter was extremely confidential, and Jun Jiuqing had nothing to do with it. How did he know so much? Yi Wentao really couldn't figure it out. He looked at Jun Jiuqing with a complicated expression. Only now did he realize that he didn't know much about Jun Jiuqing. This person was extremely dangerous. Jun Jiuqing didn't answer his question. He knew a lot of things, so why should he tell Yi Wentao, who was already crippled. It seems that I really overestimated you. Jun Jiuqing smiled faintly. After so many years, it's really a miracle that Family E hasn't been implicated by you. Don't worry, Family E is definitely several times better in my hands than in yours. In the future, you should continue to rest here quietly. With that, he turned and left. It seemed that he didn't want to say so much to Yi Wentao. Obviously, he came this time to deal with the black-clothed man, and also to cut off Yi Wentao's last path of retreat. Yi Wentao's eyes were bloodshot. Stop right there. He suddenly let out a roar. Jun Jiuqing stopped in his tracks and looked back. Boom! A cluster of green flames suddenly burst out from Yi Wentao's body. Jun Jiuqing's pupils shrank. Yi Wentao was going to self-destruct. He was crazy. Yi Wentao was indeed crazy. The black-clothed man's death and Jun Jiuqing's words were the last straw that broke the camel's back. He thought that he still had a chance to turn the tables, but now, everything was in vain. He didn't need to think about it to know what kind of life he would live in the future. Like a prisoner, extremely lowly, trapped in this place, never seeing the light of day. Until he died. Yi Wentao's life was proud and honorable. How could he bear such an ending? Since all hope was gone, he might as well die with Jun Jiuqing. Even though Yi Wentao was crippled now, he was still a top-rate revered god in the past. If he forcibly self-destruct, the consequences. At such a close distance, even if Jun Jiuqing didn't die, he would be crippled. Jun Jiuqing, however, the flames on Yi Wentao's body were spreading too quickly. He had already made up his mind to die, so he didn't hold back at all as he madly urged the origin power in his body to burn. A terrifying aura was rapidly gathering. Jun Jiuqing knew that something was wrong. He made a prompt decision and turned to run. Bang! He directly forced open the door. Master, what's going on? The elder guarding the door was shocked. He was about to ask when he saw a shadow flash before him. Before he could finish, a scorching and terrifying aura suddenly rushed out of the room. A deep sense of fear welled up in his heart, and he subconsciously looked inside. Yi Wentao had become a burning man. The accumulated power in every inch of his body was burning crazily. After all, he used to be a powerful god. The power in his body was extremely shocking. The elder immediately sensed the danger. Yi Wentao was going to self-destruct. Without a second thought, he immediately retreated. At this moment, he didn't have time to think about what had happened inside to make Yi Wentao make such a choice. There was only one thought in his mind: run. However, before he could run too far, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly came from behind him. A terrifying wave of qi gushed forth like a surging river, engulfing everything. Green flames covered the sky and earth. The elder was hit by this terrifying explosive force. His body flew out and was torn into pieces in midair. Then, he was swallowed by the green flames that were spreading crazily. From life to death, everything happened in the blink of an eye. Although Jun Jiuqing's reaction was extremely fast and he managed to escape further away, he was still unavoidably affected by this power. His chest shook and he spat out blood. At this moment, his internal organs felt as if they had been crushed by this power and were about to explode. His vision turned black and he fainted. This commotion quickly spread. The entire family finally fell into chaos. Chu Luiyue and the others, who were far away in the Divine Ruins world, did not know what happened to the family. However, Imo Shiqian had always been in contact with Yi Wentao. In the midst of the chaotic battle, his expression suddenly froze. He gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "Useless thing." Rong Xiu heard this. He narrowed his eyes slightly and then realized what had happened. His thin lips curled up slightly. It seems that the winner of the family Yi has been decided. You. Imo Shiqian looked up suddenly. You did it. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. There can't be two tigers on one mountain. Do you still need me to do such a thing personally? If he didn't do anything, the family Yi would turn the world upside down. After all, Yi Wentao and Jun Jiuqing were not easy to deal with. Judging from Imo Shiqian's reaction, Jun Jiuqing should have won. This was the same result he had expected. Imo Shiqian was furious. What he hated the most was Rong Xiu's always calm and collected appearance. It was as if nothing in the world could disturb his mind, and no one could gain the slightest advantage from him. No matter what kind of trouble he encountered, he always seemed to be victorious. What right did he have? Mo Shiqian was unconvinced and indignant. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. After the fight just now, his body was already riddled with injuries and bloodstains. However, Rong Xiu was much stronger than him. Although he was also injured and stained with messy blood, most of it was not his own blood. A few years ago, he was at a critical juncture of cultivation, so he could not fight Rong Xiu head-on. He thought that after such a long time, he could finally surpass Rong Xiu. Who knew? Things did not go as he wished. He was cultivating, but Rong Xiu's strength was also increasing. If this went on, he would be the one to lose in the end. One had to know that Rong Xiu had not summoned his divine body yet. Moreover, he also had 2 divine bodies. On the other hand, the 2 divine bodies that he had painstakingly cultivated were now entangled by Chu Luiyue and Chang Wanzhou. Chang Wanzhou seemed to be the weakest, but his endurance was extremely astonishing. It had been so long, but his speed and movement technique had not weakened at all. Needless to say, Chu Luiyue was even more so. Just the flowing clouds flying diagram alone was enough to give him a headache. Not to mention, she had the help of Dumpling, who had already opened the 5th meridian. Moreover, she still had a trump card that she had not revealed. This battle was most likely going to be very dangerous. Mo Shiqian thought quickly and made a decision. This could not go on. Blood Heaven Realm. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. When she heard this, she took a closer look and saw that there was more blood on Mo Shiqian's body than the other 3. Although his body was still shrouded in a layer of black mist, it had become much thinner after a series of fierce battles. Clearly, he had used up a lot of energy just now. The Blood Heavenly Realm is the Sect Master's trump card. Since he's using it now, he'll definitely win. After a moment, someone said loudly. This was the Black Demon Cave's territory. There was no reason for these 3 to be so presumptuous. There was a reason for the previous incident, but this time, the same thing would never happen again. Just as everyone was about to besiege, Mo Shiqian suddenly said, "Everyone from the Black Demon Cave, listen up. Get into formation." No one dared to disobey the order. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Without the protection of Rong Xiu's barrier, the 3 of them were immediately in a dangerous situation. There were so many cultivators from the Black Demon Cave here. If they all attacked together, she was afraid. Thinking of this, she quickly turned her head to take a look. However, what she saw stunned her on the spot. The people from the Black Demon Cave did not go forward to attack. Instead, they spread out. They stood neatly and all of them did the same action. Their arms were crossed in front of their chests, their fists clenched, and their heads lowered slightly. Chu Luiyue frowned. Why did they look more like they were performing some kind of ritual? As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, she saw spots of light appear one after another above everyone's heads. The spots of light were only the size of a fist and were not dazzling. They were faint blood red. It looked like a blood moon. Chu Luiyue suddenly remembered the totem of the Black Demon Sword sect. 2 swords cupping the moon. Moreover, it was indeed a blood moon. However, for some reason, this scene was inexplicably familiar. People of the Black Demon Cave, please protect us. Suddenly, Mo Shiqian opened his mouth and said something in a low voice. He stood in front of the Blood Heaven mirror, facing the blood-red mirror. This voice was filled with admiration and expectation, as if he was summoning something. Chu Luiyue had never seen such a situation before and was puzzled for a moment. Mo Shiqian was seeking help? He's waiting for someone. Rong Xiu's figure moved, and he came to her side as he spoke softly. Chu Luiyue glanced at him. Waiting for who? Rong Xiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and did not answer. Chu Luiyue slowly clenched her fists. In fact, the answer was not difficult to guess. At this time, of course Mo Shiqian was waiting for someone who could help them. However, who could it be? Suddenly, a figure slowly emerged from the sea of blood in the blood heaven mirror. Following this, an ancient voice could be heard. What's the matter? This voice seemed to come from a distant time and space, carrying an astonishing pressure. As soon as the voice fell, the surrounding space seemed to tremble. Emo Shurchen bowed and said, I had no choice but to disturb you. I really didn't want to. However, I'm in trouble this time. Please help me. He raised his hand and pointed at Chu Liwei. Please, kill the 3 people from Shengguanyu. Between heaven and earth, there was silence. Chu Liwei suddenly approached Rong Xiu and whispered, Why do I feel this voice is so familiar? Before she finished speaking, the voice sounded surprised and happy. Little girl, you. Users of mobile phones, please browse and read. A better reading experience came from Love Network. Chapter 2021. Chu Liwei was taken aback. This voice. Senior Diwu. She spoke with some uncertainty. The figure in the blood heaven realm gradually lost its blood-red color, revealing its original appearance. His face was kind, and he looked like an immortal. It was Diwu Zhangzi, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. At this moment, those weathered eyes were looking at Chu Liwei with joy and longing. Come and let this old man take a look. Emo Shurchen, who was originally full of confidence, was shocked. The people who were standing in the array were also stunned. What did he say? What did he just shout? You. It was obvious who he was shouting at. Even a fool could tell. As senior, you. Emo Shurchen was so shocked that his heart was trembling. He had spent so much effort to invite this person here to deal with Rong Xiu and Chu Liwei. Why did the situation seem to be developing in an uncontrollable direction now? Diwu Zhangzi frowned impatiently and waved his hand. Hey, Emo Shurchen, right? Get out of the way first. Don't block my from coming over. As he spoke, he tilted his head and shouted at Chu Liwei with a smile. Girl, come over. Emo Shurchen's body stiffened, and his mind went blank for a moment. For a moment, he almost suspected that he had heard wrongly. But in the blood heaven realm, Diwu Zhangzi's eager and happy smile at Chu Liwei was enough to explain everything. Chu Liwei hesitated for a moment, but still chose to go forward. With Diwu Zhangzi here, no one dared to act rashly. She walked all the way to the front smoothly and bowed respectfully and obediently. You, greets Senior Diwu. Diwu Zhangzi looked at her and sighed. I haven't seen you for a while. Has really become more and more beautiful. The corner of Chu Liwei's mouth twitched. She slowly raised her hand and took off the mask on her face. Senior Diwu, you can say this later. She had that ordinary face of hers, yet he could still praise her like that. Diwu Zhangzi waved his hand. Are you, has always been the most beautiful girl in the world? Who would dare to question him? His words were filled with arrogance and pride. His words caused many people to look at Chu Liwei. The woman wore an ordinary crimson dress, and her fine black hair fluttered in the wind. The face under the mask was as white as snow, with skin of ice and bones of jade. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her eyes were like autumn waters. In particular, the free and easy feeling between her brows added to her elegance. Many people's eyes flashed with surprise. The legendary Shengguanyu, the princess of the Tianling dynasty, was like a legend. She was indeed the most beautiful woman in the world. Chu Liwei laughed, his eyes curved into crescents. Don't tease me. Diwu Zhangzi looked at her and suddenly asked, You've cultivated a divine body. Chu Liwei was still wearing that layer of gorgeous soft armor, which shone with a piercingly cold and noble light under the sunlight. She nodded slightly. I just cultivated it not long ago. Diwu Zhangzi was overjoyed. Is indeed amazing. He thought it would take some time, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. Sure enough, this girl's talent and opportunities were far beyond ordinary people's. How have you been? Chu Liwei asked. I wanted to go back and take a look, but I couldn't find the time. I didn't expect to meet you here today. Her lips curved slightly and she said softly. What a coincidence. There was a moment of dead silence. Diwu Zhangze touched his nose awkwardly. Mo Shiqian's blood had already coagulated, and his limbs were numb. He spent a lot of effort to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. Senior Diwu, you know Shangguan Yu? This sentence was simply nonsense. Anyone could tell that not only did they know each other, but they also had a close relationship. Otherwise, how could they call each other so intimately? But at this moment, Mo Shiqian almost couldn't think of this. He realized that the external aid he invited might have become the enemy's helper. Diwu Zhangze looked at Mo Shiqian. The smile on his face faded, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. This was a far cry from the kind and warm attitude he had when facing Chu Luiyue just now. That's right. You, can be considered half a disciple of mine. What? You invited this old man here today just to kill her? Mo Shiqian was shocked, and his heart sank. Half a disciple. This kind of relationship was indeed incomparable to ordinary people. In his impression, this person had never taken in a disciple before. How could Chu Luiyue? Mo Shiqian's heart was in a mess. Inviting a master to kill his disciple, what a joke. Chu Luiyue blinked. Half a master. Actually, this was a little exaggerated. When she was in the Red Moon Desert, she spent most of her time with Dabao. And the things she learned there, such as various prescriptions and Xian formations, were basically all learned from Dabao. But at this time, this kind of explanation was obviously more convincing. Diwu Zhangze secretly glanced at Chu Luiyue. Seeing that her eyes were bright and she had no intention of refuting, he was immediately in a good mood. Taking advantage of Dabao's absence, it was great to be Yu's master for a period of time. Mo Shiqian opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. Master and disciple, it's a long story. Diwu Zhangze had already looked at Chu Luiyue and said helplessly and guiltily. In the early years, I had some dealings with the sect master of the Black Demon Cave, but that's all in the past. If this girl knew that he had received many offerings from the Black Demon Cave back then, he was afraid. Anyway, I have no direct relationship with them now. The reason why I came today is that there is a trace of my aura in the Blood Heaven realm. This is also left behind from back then. Diwu Zhangze rubbed his temples in annoyance. In fact, he indeed didn't have any dealings with the Black Demon Cave. It was just that the relationship wasn't completely severed back then, which gave Mo Shiqian a chance. If he had known the situation here would be like this, he wouldn't have come no matter what. He was almost misunderstood by you. Zhangze felt wronged. He had been trapped in the Red Moon Desert for so long, what else could he do? Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Diwu Zhangze's attitude couldn't be more obvious when he sided with Chu Luiyue. Even if he was invited by Mo Shiqian. At this time, he was obviously still on Chu Luiyue's side. How could they fight? Mo Shiqian clenched his fists, and the waves in his heart couldn't calm down for a long time. He never thought that things would develop like this in the end. Diwu Zhangze was actually Chu Luiyue's backer. Why hadn't he heard of it before? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2022. Diwu Zhangze was a powerful backer that the Black Demon Cave's ancestral sect leader had latched onto thousands of years ago. For a period of time, Diwu Zhangze did indeed have a good relationship with the Black Demon Cave. Of course, this good referred to the fact that he felt that the things sent by the Black Demon Cave were good and to his liking. But, in all honesty, ever since he was trapped in the Red Moon Desert, he had never received any benefits from them. Diwu Zhangze felt wronged, but how could Mo Shiqian not have mixed feelings? This Blood Heaven realm was passed down by the Black Demon Cave's sect leaders. It was a symbol of status and also a great trump card. From the day he became the sect leader, he knew that the aura of a powerful being was sealed inside. As long as he joined forces with the people of the Black Demon Cave, he could summon him. But such an opportunity only came once. So over the years, the sect leader of the Black Demon Cave cherished this opportunity very much and did not dare to use it easily. Only when the entire Black Demon Cave was in a life-and-death crisis could they use this trump card. If Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu hadn't appeared together today and Mo Shiqian still didn't have the momentum to win after a long battle, he wouldn't have chosen to invite this person over. Mo Shiqian's idea was very simple: seize the opportunity to eliminate these people once and for all. This way, it wouldn't be a waste of this one and only great opportunity. But who knew that things would turn out like this? Even if the Black Demon Cave could barely establish a relationship with this person, how could it compare to their master-disciple relationship? Everyone in the Black Demon Cave looked at Mo Shiqian in shock and helplessness. Mo Shiqian clenched his fists, and the flames in his chest seemed to be about to burst. "I see," Chu Luiwei said with a smile. "In that case, there really was a misunderstanding. Senior, you don't know. When I didn't know it was you just now, I really thought I was going to die here today." "Bah, what do you mean die? Don't talk nonsense." Although he knew that she was joking, Diu Zhangze couldn't bear to hear her say such things. After all, he knew that this girl had really died once. And at that time, she didn't even have any memories. She had forgotten all about them. Thinking of that time, Diu Zhangze's heart ached. Wait a minute. That time? Was it because the Black Demon Cave attacked her? Diu Zhangze looked at Mo Shiqian slowly. A chill instantly enveloped Mo Shiqian. His heart skipped a beat. Among other things, his intuition was very accurate in this regard. Diu Zhangze was looking at him like, "Oh, that's right. Little Yu, was he the one who attacked you a few years ago?" Diu Zhangze asked slowly. Chu Luiwei blinked. "You still remember? Speaking of which, it was a long time ago." "I remember. At that time, Sect Master Mo seemed to want to snatch something from me." She paused, and the smile on her lips deepened. "A few years have passed, but Sect Master Mo is still very persistent about this matter. Not long ago, the family E and the Nan family joined forces and headed to Peach Blossom Dock to surround and intercept us." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Mo Shiqian shouted, the veins on his forehead bulging. Although Chu Luiwei was telling the truth, how could he admit it in front of Diu Zhangze at this time? Wasn't this purely attracting hatred? Diu Zhangze was already very unhappy that he invited him over to kill her. If he knew that he had used so many methods previously, Diu Zhangze would probably want to kill him. How is it nonsense? Chu Luiwei looked surprised. Didn't Sect Master Mo help transfer Nanyi's Yuan Meridian to her brother? It's also because of this that Nan Yifan blamed Nanyi's death on me and hates me to the core. And Family E, why do you think they suddenly had the idea of snatching Peach Blossom Dock? Moreover, they acted together with the Nan family. This is too much of a coincidence. What do you think? Chu Luiwei's words were very clear and logical. Even those who didn't know much about these matters could sense that something was amiss when they heard this. Obviously, someone was secretly instigating and sowing discord. And who this person was? It was even more obvious. Mo Shiqian clenched his fists tightly and looked at Chu Luiwei as if he wanted to tear him apart. Family? Nan family? Little girl, they must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to dare to make a move on you. A trace of shock flashed across Diu Zhangze's face, and he instinctively glanced at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu moved and walked forward with a faint smile. Driven by benefits, those people are naturally capable of doing anything. At this time, he had also removed the disguise on his face. There was a faint smile on his handsome and devilish face. Even if he was dressed in extremely simple and ordinary clothes, it couldn't hide his peerless beauty. When the two of them stood together, the surrounding scenery immediately paled in comparison. Even if they didn't do anything, it would always make people involuntarily look over. His features were picturesque and his charm was unparalleled. That's the princess's husband? The legendary holy son of the Yuntian Tower? He Ziji looked at this scene in a daze and muttered in a low voice. Although they hadn't been to the Divine Ruins world, rumors about these two people had already spread among many cultivators in the past few months. In fact, this news was first spread by the people of the Black Demon Cave. The main purpose of doing this was to attract those genius cultivators to Cloud State City to participate in their trial. They didn't expect that Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu would actually appear here directly. When they thought of how they had interacted with these two for so long and even owed them a favor, He Ziji and his sister couldn't help but look at each other and see the shock and disbelief in each other's eyes. No wonder she's so strong, he Xilan subconsciously said in a low voice. To think that they were talking about the princess in front of those two, but they didn't expect that the real princess was right in front of them. Seeing that Diwu Zhangze was still angry, Chu Liwei smiled and comforted him. However, Senior Diwu, you don't have to worry too much. Those troubles have been resolved. Nan Yifan is already dead. As for Yi Wentao, he's also dead. If I'm not wrong, it should have happened just now. Rong Xiu added. Chu Liwei raised his eyebrows slightly and glanced at him. Since Rong Xiu said so, it should be close to the truth. It seemed that Yi Wentao's life after returning wasn't easy. He even died in such a short time. Jun Jiuqing still had some tricks up his sleeve. Chu Liwei thought to himself. To be able to ascend to the position of family Yi's head with a different surname was not simple. Now that Yi Wentao was dead, the entire family Yi was in his hands. Hearing this, Diwu Zhangze finally calmed down a little. These days, any dog dared to touch their Yu? Did they really think that they couldn't support you, or just because they were trapped in the Red Moon Desert? His gaze was cold as he asked word by word. Mo Shiqian, what do you want to steal from you? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2023. This question was low, cold, and oppressive. Every word was like a mountain that weighed heavily on Mo Shiqian's heart. What did he want? Of course, it was the thing in Chu Liyue's body. But he couldn't say this out loud. The scene fell into a stalemate and was deathly silent. The air seemed to have solidified. Everyone held their breaths and waited. At this moment, even breathing seemed wrong. It's all a misunderstanding. Finally, Mo Shiqian spoke slowly. Every word seemed to be spat out through gritted teeth. Previously, Shiqian didn't know that Shangguan Yu had such a relationship with you. I hope Senior can forgive me for offending you. He lowered his head and compromised. The people from Black Demon Cave were shocked at first, then they looked dejected and desperate. Even the sect master said so. That made sense. They had spent so much effort to invite foreign aid, but in the end, they were supporting the other party. Then how could this match go on? There was probably nothing more embarrassing than this. Misunderstanding? I don't think so. Diwu Zhangze interrupted him and sneered. Just now, this old man heard it clearly. You wanted to kill you and the others. Although this old man is old, I haven't reached the stage of being blind and deaf. Even if it's really a misunderstanding, can I make a mistake a few years ago and make another mistake now? Mo Shiqian closed his eyes and took a deep breath to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. It's a long story. I can't explain it to you in a short time. I have a lot of time. If you have anything to say, just say it. If I can resolve the misunderstanding between you two, I'll have done a good deed, right? Diwu Zhangze laughed. But in Mo Shiqian's ears, this laugh was undoubtedly the greatest mockery. He gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. There was really no way to clean up this situation now. Explain? There was no explanation at all. He was the one who did those things. How could he explain it clearly? Mo Shiqian never thought that Chu Liwei had such a backer. He lowered his head slightly and didn't say a word. Seeing his reaction, what else could Diwu Zhangze doubt? Mo Shiqian Yu. Before she could finish her sentence, Mo Shiqian suddenly moved. He turned his fist into a palm and slammed it toward the blood heaven mirror in front of him. Since the person he invited wasn't a helper, then there was no need for him to be so respectful. The thick black mist instantly shrouded the blood heaven realm. Diwu Zhangze shouted angrily. Mo Shiqian, how dare you? He wanted to destroy the blood heaven realm. It contained Diwu Zhangze's aura. If the blood heaven realm was destroyed, Diwu Zhangze would also be affected. Moreover, without the blood heaven mirror, he couldn't do anything. Since Senior doesn't intend to help, then don't blame us for being impolite. Before he finished his words, Mo Shiqian had already slapped the center of the blood heaven realm. Sect leader. When Do Min and the others saw this, They were all shocked and cried out in surprise. They all knew that Blood Heaven Realm was closely related to Emo Shiqian. Most of his cultivation relied on this item. If he was injured, he could only recover quickly by relying on the Blood Heaven Realm. Once the Blood Heaven Realm was destroyed, he would also be greatly affected. But now that things had come to this, he had no other choice. A crisp cracking sound was heard. A crack quickly spread on the Blood Heaven Realm. Almost at the same time as the Blood Heaven Realm shattered, Emo Shiqian's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The aura around his body also instantly became dispirited. But he didn't stop attacking. As long as the Blood Heaven Realm was destroyed, the only way for Diwu Zhangzi to come would be cut off. If he didn't come, Emo Shiqian and the entire Black Demon Cave might still have a chance to survive. Sensing Emo Shiqian's thoughts, Diwu Zhangzi snorted coldly, and blood energy filled the air. A terrifying pressure suddenly surged out from it. Emo Shiqian's heart sank. Before he could react, he was blown away by the violent air wave. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were standing not far away and were about to be affected. However, just as the power was about to engulf them, a figure suddenly broke out of the Blood Heaven Realm. Boom! The Blood Heaven Realm completely shattered. However, that figure stood in front of them and easily blocked the violent energy that was sweeping towards them. Everyone turned to look at that figure. It was Diwu Zhangzi. But at this time, his figure was a translucent phantom. And this was the aura he had stored in the Blood Heaven Realm. Emo Shiqian looked at the scene in front of him in shock and disbelief. How could this be? When the Blood Heaven Realm shattered, your aura should also dissipate. He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone present understood what he meant. Diwu Zhangzi first turned around and carefully looked at Chu Luiyue. I came out in a hurry just now. Did I hurt you? He asked with concern and nervousness. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I'm fine. Not to mention that with her current strength, she could perfectly avoid the attack. Even if it was too late, there was still Rong Xiu and him. The two of them stood in front of her and protected her tightly. It would be strange if she was still injured. Diwu Zhangzi was relieved after making sure that she wasn't affected. That's good, that's good. On the one hand, he felt sorry for you. On the other hand, if Dabao and Lan Xiao found out that he didn't protect you, well, TSK. Diwu Zhangzi didn't know if he could still survive in the Red Moon Desert. He let out a long sigh of relief and looked at Emo Shiqian. Emo Shiqian met those old and cold eyes, and his heart suddenly trembled. You're right. Without the Blood Heaven Realm, I can't come over. Diwu Zhangzi stroked his beard. But who told you that my aura would be annihilated if the Blood Heaven Realm shattered? Emo Shiqian opened his mouth but didn't make a sound. He thought so because this was tacitly agreed by the Black Demon Cave sect masters, who knew that after the Blood Heaven Realm shattered, not only did the aura not dissipate, but it even appeared. Suddenly, Diwu Zhangzi patted his head. Oh, I remember now. This should be what Emo Yao said back then. Emo Yao was the first sect master of the Black Demon Cave and the forger of the Blood Heaven Realm. He told you that you can summon me with the Blood Heaven Realm, and if you destroy it, you can also cut off my way of life, right? Diwu Zhangzi looked at him sympathetically. Silly child, I lied to him back then. Why did you all believe it? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2024. Emo Shiqian felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Even when he knew that Diwu Zhangzi was Chu Luiyue's half-master, he had never been so desperate. Fake? All of this was fake? This was the highest-level secret of the Black Demon Cave, which had been passed down for thousands of years. All the previous sect masters had believed in it and kept it strictly. But it turned out that it had been a complete lie from the beginning. Emo Shiqian's blood and qi surged, and his aura showed signs of rebellion. The strong smell of blood between his lips and teeth kept surging, almost suffocating him. His mind buzzed and seemed to be blank. Even everything in front of him seemed to be distorted and became illusory. Diwu Zhangzi's voice kept coming into his ears. To me, The blood heavenly realm is nothing more than a place for this remnant aura to reside. Even if it's gone, I can still stay in another place. However, I remember that this blood heaven realm seems to be very important to you, right? Especially since you're the sect master. If I'm not wrong, more than half of your force will be consumed when the blood heaven realm is broken, right? Diwu Zhangzi shook his head with emotion. So miserable, so miserable. Years of hard work and cultivation were ruined just like that. Those who heard it were sad and those who heard it shed tears. Mo Shiqian spat out another mouthful of blood. After the blood heaven realm was broken, the black mist that had been lingering around him gradually dissipated. His face was finally revealed in front of everyone. Chu Luiyue looked over, and surprise flashed across her eyes. Mo Shiqian looked very young, only in his 20s. His appearance was delicate and even a little feminine. His skin was very white, and if one looked carefully, one could even see the faint blue blood vessels under his thin skin. It was as if he had never seen the sun all year round. Anyone who saw him would find it hard to accept that the famous sect master of the Black Demon Cave had such a look. Did he rely on cultivation to maintain this appearance? Chu Luiyue asked in a low voice. It was said that Mo Shiqian had been the sect master for decades. His true age was obviously not the 20-something years old that he appeared to be. Rong Xiu nodded. Diwu Zhangzi chuckled. Girl, there's something you don't know. The cultivation method of the Black Demon Cave is different from that of other sects and clans. They devour the essence and force of other cultivators to improve their own strength. It's extremely insidious. Moreover, the younger and more talented, the richer and purer the power they can extract. Mo Shiqian is now at the peak of the god realm. To reach this step, his hands are stained with the blood of countless cultivators. This was also why he had lied to Mo Yao back then. From the very beginning, he knew that this Black Demon Cave was not a good place. But at that time, he didn't care. Who would have thought that today, they would actually stretch their hands towards you? This Diwu Zhangzi. Chu Luiyue was shocked when she heard this, but she instantly understood something. No wonder. The Black Demon sect had to AS cultivators, however, after they gathered these people, they did not spend much effort in nurturing them. Instead, they killed them in batches. It turned out, it was all because of this. Below, Ziji and the rest also turned pale when they heard this. He had originally thought that after participating in this trial, he would be able to enter the Divine Ruins world and achieve meteoric success, becoming a top expert. In the end, they were just here to die. If not for Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu, they would have. Everyone was scared. Looking at the surroundings, the mountains were undulating and lush. Who would have guessed that this was a hellish place? Relying on such methods to forcibly improve one's cultivation is against the heavens. It's a grave sin. In the end, it will only backfire on oneself. Diwu Zhangzi stared at Mo Shiqian, his eyes cold. Originally, this old man didn't want to meddle in your affairs after all these years of self-cultivation. But you delivered yourselves to me. Don't blame this old man for being rude. With that, he suddenly raised his hand. An invisible pressure quickly spread out in all directions. Condense. Following his shout, Chu Luiyue suddenly realized that the surrounding space was quickly solidifying. After the blood heaven mirror shattered, it disintegrated into countless fragments and scattered in all directions. Along the way, it carried several violent forces that almost tore the void apart and caused the world to tremble. However, after Diwu Zhangzi shouted, all the movements suddenly stopped. The fluttering leaves suddenly stopped in the air. The collapsed cliffs and rocks no longer rolled down. The air was filled with a faint smell of blood and a trace of icy cold air. A crease suddenly appeared in midair. Chu Luiyue widened his eyes in shock. That was a fold caused by forcibly twisting space. Then a second, a third. This world seemed to be under Diwu Zhangzi's control. With a wave of his wrist, he caused the endless void to twist and fold. He didn't summon the divine realm, but he was the only master here. Diwu Zhangzi spat out a word between his lips. The wrinkles quickly gathered around Mo Shiqian and surrounded him. Then there was a loud bang. Boom! The huge space directly exploded, Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 2025. There were no tricks, no hesitation. From the beginning to the end, Diu Zhangze only made one move and said 2 words. And these 2 words easily determined Mo Shiqian's life and death. When the compressed space exploded, Mo Shiqian's figure was instantly swallowed. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted, and she could hardly believe what she was seeing. Actually, this was the first time she had seen Diu Zhangze make a move with her own eyes. Back in the Red Moon Desert, although she had fought with Diu Zhangze and the others, their goal at that time was to improve her strength, so they knew how to hold back. She only knew that they were all very powerful, but she didn't know the upper limit of their strength. She had never seen them truly fight to the death with anyone. Furthermore, this was only Diu Zhangze's aura. Then, how strong was his true strength? Moreover, Diu Zhangze wasn't the strongest among the 3 of them. Chu Liyue still remembered that Lan Xiao had once said in disdain, "Diwu? He just knows how to play with space. He doesn't have much ability." It was precisely because of this sentence that Chu Liyue had sent Mu Hongyu to the Red Moon Desert and let her cultivate with Diu Zhangze. Lan Xiao's words were still ringing in her ears. Looking at the scene in front of her, Chu Liyue was speechless. This was just playing with space and not much ability. Then how could the rest of the people in this world live? Ah! A miserable cry of agony could be heard coming from within. Even though the space there was chaotic and all kinds of black spatial rifts intertwined, and outsiders couldn't see anything at all, it wasn't difficult to imagine what kind of terrifying torture Mo Shiqian had experienced when they heard this sound. Many people from the Black Demon Cave were frightened out of their wits. Some even wanted to retreat. This person was simply too terrifying. The sect master's strength could be considered the top in the entire Black Demon Cave. Even he couldn't gain any advantage from the other party, let alone them. The world was silent, and Mo Shiqian's voice sounded especially mournful. It was chilling. However, this voice didn't last long. As time passed, the sound gradually weakened until it completely disappeared. "Sect Master? How is it?" Someone asked cautiously and fearfully. No one answered. He didn't need to guess to know that it wouldn't be any better. Hong An looked at the space that was crazily strangling and shuddered. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and planned to leave quietly. This place was too dangerous, especially when those 3 people were brought in by him. No matter what, he had to escape as soon as possible. However, just as he took a step forward, a strange voice sounded from the front. He was shocked and looked up, only to see a spatial fold surging toward him like a wave. Danger! Hong An knew that something was wrong. He moved his feet and was about to retreat quickly. But at this moment, how could he still be in control? The space around him suddenly froze, making him unable to move. He could only watch as the fold approached. No! Hong An's eyes widened in horror. The next moment he felt a chill at his waist. The voice in his throat also stopped abruptly. He slowly looked down, only to see that the lower part of his body was gone. He was swallowed and strangled by the spatial fold. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Only then did the intense pain come flooding in from all directions. Hong An's eyes rolled back and he fainted. But soon, his upper body was also erased by the spatial fold that kept coming back and forth. In the blink of an eye, he was gone. This scene made everyone more and more silent. It also made those who were ready to make a move extremely frightened and dispelled those unnecessary thoughts. Diu Zhangze didn't even look over. He only stroked his beard and said calmly, "Did I say you could leave?" He rarely made a move, but when he did, it had to be perfect. He hated disobedient people the most. "If I tell you to stay here, then stay here. Why are you moving around? You almost destroyed the spatial pattern that I had painstakingly conceived." If everyone knew what he was thinking at this moment, they would probably vomit blood again. It turned out that the lives of these people were not as important as that spatial fold in his eyes. Chu Liyue exhaled softly. Diu Zhangze was already so powerful. What about Lan Xiao? And what about Dabao? Moreover, Dabao seemed to be rather fearful of the Divine Ruins world and had been unwilling to make a move there. Even now, she was still very puzzled about this matter. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Luiwei put away her chaotic thoughts and looked up. In the chaotic space that was already distorted beyond recognition, a fist-sized black fog suddenly broke out from it. And within that black fog was an extremely familiar aura. That was Emo Shiqian's soul. Chu Luiwei's heart tightened. Diwu Zhangzi had already made a move again. Sacrificing your life to protect your soul. You're smart. However, if you think you can escape like this, you're too naive. As soon as he finished speaking, several spatial folds appeared in the surroundings again and surrounded that black fog. However, at this moment, a series of explosions sounded one after another. It was the blood moon-like balls of light above the Black Demon Cave people's heads that exploded one after another. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2026. Balls of blood-colored light exploded, instantly tearing the surrounding space apart. These forces seemed to be guided by something and intertwined with each other, forcibly carving out a bloody path. And the black fog that carried Emo Shiqian's soul fled along that path. It was extremely fast. Diwu Zhangzi sneered. Want to run? Not so easy. He waved his hands, and the surrounding space began to squeeze toward the center again. Emo Shiqian's path forward was sealed again. Bang! The black fog crashed forward fiercely, but it could not break through the space barrier in front of it. Diwu Zhangzi had already sealed this place. How could he escape? Even when he was at his peak, he might not be able to do so, let alone now. The Blood Heaven realm was already destroyed, and Emo Shiqian was done for. His current actions were just the desperate struggle of a cornered beast. A transparent cage suddenly appeared in Diwu Zhangzi's palm. The cage was only the size of a palm, and it shone faintly under the sunlight. Chu Luiwei focused on it, and his gaze suddenly focused. The glittering dots of light on the surface were actually runes. Exquisite technique, go! Diwu Zhangzi let out a clear shout, and the small transparent cage quickly flew out. It silently drew a straight silver line in the air, and went straight for the black fog. There was no way to avoid it. Just as the black fog was about to be locked up by the transparent cage, an explosion suddenly came from their side. Chu Luiwei immediately looked back and frowned. It was a subordinate of the Black Demon Cave. His body suddenly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist. He didn't even have the chance to cry out in pain before he lost his life. Then, the cloud of blood mist actually flew toward the black fog. As soon as the two came into contact, they quickly merged. The color of the black fog seemed to have become a little thicker. Furthermore, there seemed to be a faint blood-red color in the middle of it. It was just that this blood color was hidden and could not be seen clearly. Then, the same thing happened one after another. Bang, bang, bang. Explosions sounded one after another, and in the blink of an eye, the surrounding subordinates of the Black Demon Cave suffered heavy casualties. One had to know that due to the huge commotion from before, almost everyone in the Black Demon Cave was here. No one expected that these people were not injured because of Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu, nor were they killed because of Diwu Zhangzi. They had all died in the hands of Emo Shiqian. A stream of warm blood splashed onto Do Min's face. He, who was in a state of deep shock and numbness, suddenly woke up. His face was pale and his voice was trembling. Without any hesitation, he used his fastest speed. However, just as he took half a step forward, the origin power in his body suddenly began to frantically gather towards his origin core, and then, bang! Before Do Min could even react, he felt an intense pain and his body completely dissipated. All the power in his body condensed into a bloody mist and merged with the black mist. At this time, the black fog had become much more solid. Inside, the blood was dense and eerie. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. This Emo Shiqian was more cunning and ruthless than she had imagined. In order to survive, he sacrificed his subordinates without hesitation. In a short while, Nearly 1/3 of the people in the Black Demon Cave had died in his hands. In Mo Shiqian's eyes, their lives were just a weight that could increase his chances of escaping. It was not worth mentioning. The power above the black fog became stronger and stronger, and its speed became faster and faster. Diwu Zhangze had already sealed this space, but he still could not completely control it. The sky fell into chaos. More and more people died, and the smell of blood filled the air. It had almost become an extremely tragic purgatory. The transparent cage followed closely behind, but as Mo Shiqian's soul devoured more and more power, the gap between the two finally began to widen. Diwu Zhangze's expression hardened. He was about to make a move when he suddenly frowned, and his hand movements stiffened for a moment. "Senior Diwu?" Rong Xiu immediately sensed that something was wrong. Hearing this, Chu Luiwei immediately looked over and realized that Diwu Zhangze's phantom had become much more transparent than before. And the aura and pressure around him had weakened a lot. Chu Luiwei's heart sank. What happened just now? Although Mo Shiqian was still struggling and trying to escape, it should not have much of an impact on Diwu Zhangze. He looked as if he had suddenly suffered some kind of attack. "It's okay." Diwu Zhangze shook his head, took a deep breath, and gathered power to attack again. However, this short delay gave Mo Shiqian a chance. In mid-air, a blood-colored totem suddenly appeared. Then, the black fog rushed over quickly, directly breaking through the surrounding space's seal and pressure, and went straight for the blood-colored totem. Rong Xiu sensed that something was wrong and immediately looked over. His phoenix eyes were stunned, and he directly made a move. A golden flame flew out, and almost at the moment when the black fog was about to disappear into the blood-colored totem, it violently exploded. Hearing this, Chu Luiwei suddenly looked up. At this glance, she only saw that the black fog was fiercely bombarded by Rong Xiu's golden flame. The blood inside seemed to surge again, and there were faint cries of pain ringing in his ears. But in the end, the black fog barely squeezed into the blood-colored totem. Then, the blood-colored totem dissipated instantly. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Many people did not even have time to see the totem before it was over. Hateful. He still escaped. A trace of annoyance appeared on Diwu Zhangze's face. Rong Xiu shook his head. "Senior, don't worry too much. His soul has been seriously injured by me, and it will take a very long time and a lot of energy to recover. Furthermore, his physical body had already been damaged. It would likely be a long time before he stopped moving." Diwu Zhangze shook his head and sighed. He knew that Rong Xiu was comforting him, but he was still a little unwilling. It was not difficult for him to kill Mo Shiqian. If not for just now, Chu Luiwei stood at the side and watched this scene, frowning even more. In just a short while, Diwu Zhangze's phantom was even more illusory than before. It was as if a gust of wind could blow it away. Compared to when he first appeared, he was as different as heaven and earth. There was really something wrong with him like this. Chu Luiwei finally couldn't help but take a step forward, and there was some worry in her eyes. "Senior Diwu, what's wrong with you?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2027. Diwu Zhangze opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but after some hesitation he swallowed his words. "Let's find a time to talk about this. For now, let's settle the matter of the Black Demon Cave first." Mo Shiqian abandoned the Black Demon Cave and ran away. Before leaving, he took the lives of nearly half of the people in the Black Demon Cave. Although the remaining half were still alive, they were more or less injured by the impact of Diwu Zhangze and Mo Shiqian's power. Most importantly, Mo Shiqian's actions had completely destroyed their beliefs and ideas. The ground was littered with broken bones, the strong smell of blood, the messy mountain top. Everything reminded them of what had just happened. Their sect master had sacrificed them in order to win a path of survival for himself. Even if they were all loyal and devoted, even if they were all going through fire and water. But it turned out that in Mo Shiqian's eyes, they were just ants, worthless at all. If he had cared about the Black Demon Cave and the people here at all, he would never have done such a thing. Compared to the destruction of the body, the collapse of one's spirit and beliefs was more likely to cause one to fall into despair and collapse. Chu Luiwei looked around. Among the remaining people, a few were venerables, and the rest were basically exalted gods. But at this moment, they all looked equally dejected. Obviously, they no longer had the strength to fight. Diwu Zhang's mind stirred, and the transparent cage suddenly grew in the wind, trapping the remaining people of the Black Demon Cave inside. After Mo Shiqian ran away, the rest of them couldn't run away anymore. You, Rong Xiu, come with me. Diwu Zhangzi knew that the two of them had a lot of questions, so after controlling these people, he proposed to have a private discussion with them. Chu Luiwei nodded slightly and looked at Chang Wanzhou. Little Zhou, stay here and watch over them first. Also, I'll leave the people below to you. Chang Wanzhou immediately nodded respectfully. Although he had always been taciturn and had a cold personality, he was extremely smart and knew how to deal with these things. Although he had been injured before, his recovery ability was very strong, so it was not a big problem. Chu Luiwei thought for a moment, then shouted again, "Dumpling!" Light flashed before his eyes, and Dumpling reverted from her true form to her human form. She raised her small face. "You stay here and help keep watch." After all, Chang Wanzhou was injured. With Dumpling around, it would be an extra layer of protection. In fact, Dumpling had already expected her thoughts. She immediately nodded and responded crisply. "Good." Chu Luiwei and the other two soon arrived at the mountain where Mo Shiqian appeared. This was also the center of the entire Black Demon Cave. Usually, there was a barrier around the mountain. Except for Mo Shiqian, no one else was allowed to enter. But now that Mo Shiqian had run away, his body was destroyed, and his soul was damaged, the enchantment naturally broke on its own. At the top of the mountain, there was a magnificent palace. It was obvious that it belonged to Mo Shiqian. As soon as they approached, a faint smell of blood spread from it. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Rong Xiu flicked his finger, and a golden flame quickly flew out, forming a line of fire around the palace and surrounding it. As the flame burned, a strange sizzling sound kept coming. At the same time, there was also an unpleasant smell. Chu Luiwei frowned even more. Diwu Zhangzi sneered. It seems that Mo Shiqian left a lot of dirty things behind. About 15 minutes later, the flames gradually extinguished. A gentle breeze blew by, and that unbearable smell finally dissipated. Even the smell of blood in the air disappeared. Rong Xiu took the lead. The three of them directly entered the palace. Walking into the palace, Chu Luiwei quickly looked around. The ornaments and decorations here were all extremely luxurious. Treasures that couldn't be found outside could be seen everywhere here. It was obvious how extravagant his daily life was. It seems that even after evacuating from the Divine Ruins world, Mo Shiqian's life is still quite comfortable. Chu Luiwei raised her eyebrows and smiled. If they hadn't come here by accident, they didn't know when they would be able to fight Mo Shiqian head-on. He was hiding here really well. The Black Demon Cave has never been short of money. Diwu Zhangzi snorted. Over the years, countless cultivators have been bewitched by them, thinking that as long as they join them, they can soar into the sky and become a top expert in the world. For this, they didn't hesitate to go bankrupt and pay an endless price. But they don't know that this is not a paradise for cultivation, but a purgatory. He knew quite a bit about the Black Demon Cave. Although he hadn't been in contact with them for a long time, it was still the same old thing today. After so many years, the inheritance of the Black Demon Cave had never been broken. Chu Luiwei nodded in agreement. Disregarding everything else, weren't the dozens of cultivators outside here for this very reason? Although there aren't many people in the Black Demon Cave, they don't seem weak. Chu Luiwei pondered for a moment and said strangely, even if they are carefully selected geniuses, it's still a little beyond common sense. Even a first-rate aristocratic family like Yun Tianke only had a handful of venerate gods in its ranks. However, venerable gods seem to be very common in the Black Demon Cave. However, the strength of these people seems to be slightly weaker than ordinary cultivators of the same level. Chu Luiwei thought of the scene when he fought with those people. Hong An was fine, but although Do Min was in the venerable god realm, the strength he displayed was barely satisfactory. Not to mention a top existence like Yi Wentao, he couldn't even compare to ordinary venerable gods. You're right. Compared to real cultivators, they are indeed a lot worse. Rong Xiu said. Chu Luiwei asked curiously. Real cultivators? This meant, was he referring to those people in the Black Demon Cave? Rong Xiu raised his chin. There was a huge wall in front of them. We'll know what's going on when we go in. There was a door on both sides of the wall. The door was unlocked and opened with a push. But thinking about it carefully, it wasn't difficult to understand. Most of the time, only Mo Shiqian was here. He didn't need to worry that someone would come here. After breaking through the door, creak, the door opened, and Rong Xiu walked in first. Diwu Zhangze and Chu Luiwei followed closely behind. When he saw the scene in front of him, Chu Luiwei was stunned. The space behind the wall was extremely empty, without any extra objects. Except for a sand table in the middle. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2028. On the sand table, the mountain range was lush and undulating. With just one look, Chu Luiwei immediately recognized that this was the sand table in Black Fiend Cave's territory. She walked closer and saw that there were blood spots on the small mountain peaks, flickering with a faint glow. Chu Luiwei focused her gaze and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that the blood spots actually contained a faint suppression. Suddenly, she turned her gaze and found that a mountain peak beside her had collapsed. This was the mountain that Hong An had brought them to in the beginning. The mountain outside had collapsed, so the model on the sand table had also changed. Chu Luiwei suddenly realized something and sucked in a cold breath. This sand table is connected to the outside world. Rong Xiu finished her sentence. His tone was not surprised, and his expression was indifferent, as if he had already expected this. Mo Shiqian can control everything outside through this sand table, and what happens outside will be quickly reflected on this sand table so that Mo Shiqian can quickly know. This was why even if he did not come out and did not listen to any reports from the servants, he still knew what was happening outside. Chu Luiwei nodded in understanding and looked at the sand table carefully, but the waves in her heart did not calm down for a long time. Mo Shiqian was really a very capable person. Cough, cough, cough. Diwu Zhangze suddenly coughed. Chu Luiwei came back to her senses and hurried forward. Senior Diwu, how are you? She had felt that his condition was a little strange just now, but now, his aura seemed to be weaker. Diwu Zhangze waved his hand. I'm fine. This aura has been trapped for many years. Now that it's out, it's inevitable that I'm not used to it. I'll be fine after resting for a while. How could Chu Luiwei not be worried? She didn't believe a single word of the reason he gave her. After pondering for a moment, Chu Luiwei asked, did something happen in the Red Moon Desert? Diwu Zhangze paused and subconsciously wanted to deny it. What? Before he finished speaking, he looked up and met a pair of dark and bright eyes. Those eyes were as bright as stars, as if they had seen through everything. Diwu Zhangze could not say the rest of his words. After hesitating for a moment, he sighed deeply. Recently, there has been some trouble in the Red Moon Desert. In the past, the old man's aura was sealed in the Blood Heaven realm and had no connection with the soul under the Red Moon Desert, so it was not affected. But now that he has broken out of the Blood Heaven realm, he will inevitably be implicated. Implicated? Chu Luiwei inexplicably felt. Diwu Zhangze seemed to be weighing his words. Although the old man isn't weak, he doesn't have a divine body, so many things aren't very convenient for him. Chu Luiwei's heart fell. Otherwise, with the strength of Diwu Zhangze and the other two, how could they have been injured? Moreover, during this period of time, there had been no news from Debao. Diwu Zhangze comforted her. Girl, don't worry. It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. Chu Luiwei stared straight at him. Diwu Zhangze suddenly could not say the rest of his words. After a long while, he finally shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. Girl, You're too smart. Nothing could be hidden from her. Chu Liu said. I'll go back with you and help you and Senior Lan Shao refine the divine body. She was the one who helped refine Debao's divine body. Now that she was much stronger than before, she should be more confident. She originally planned to go to the Red Moon Desert after the matter in the Peach Blossom Dock was over. Now was the time. Diu Zhangzi shook his head. Girl, you can't go now. Can't? But Chu Luiwei was puzzled. She had been to the Red Moon Desert many times, and it was just outside the Divine Ruins world. She could reach there quickly without crossing the Gate Realm. Diu Zhangzi paused for a moment. Lan Shao and I are not as strong as Debao. Therefore, even with your help, we still won't be able to refine our divine bodies in our current state. Even if you go, it'll be in vain. Moreover, the Red Moon Desert is in a dangerous period now. Any powerhouse below the level of a venerable god will die without a trace. If you go. Chu Liwei was stunned, then she lowered her head slightly. She knew about the dangerous period of the Red Moon Desert. Every 100 years, the Red Moon Desert would be shrouded by the blood moon for a month. Generally speaking, when the blood moon appeared, Debao and the other two could come out from underground and wander around freely. But the dangerous period was different. During that month, the entire desert was dark and blood red, and the energy of heaven and earth was violent. It was extremely dangerous. That was why it was called the dangerous period. I know that your strength has increased greatly, and you can even fight against a venerable god powerhouse. But you're not a real venerable god after all. As long as you haven't broken through that threshold, you can't enter the Red Moon Desert during the dangerous period. Diwu Zhangzi sighed. During this month, the three of us can't even take care of ourselves, let alone take care of you. If those two guys know that I brought you back, it'll really cause a ruckus. In the end, it was because they were worried about her. Chu Liuyue's thoughts turned. Dangerous period. No wonder there was no news from Debao for so long. He was really delayed. But, Senior Diwu, I remember Senior Lan Shao mentioned before that the last dangerous period of the Red Moon Desert was less than 100 years ago, right? Chu Luiwei asked uncertainly. She had heard Lan Shao mention the dangerous period a few years ago in the Red Moon Desert. Hearing what he said, it didn't seem to have happened that long ago. If it had been 100 years, he wouldn't have said it in that tone, but she didn't ask for the exact time, so she could only guess. Diwu Zhangzi was stunned, then he cursed in his heart. Lan Shao can't keep his mouth shut. Isn't it enough for him to be obsessed with my beauty every day? Why is he still so talkative? And he's talking about such important things. Can I let you know about this? You're right. It's indeed less than 100 years since the last dangerous period. But the energy of heaven and earth in the Red Moon Desert has always been unstable. The so-called 100 years is actually just a rough estimate and not accurate. This time, it might also be related to Debao's recondensing of the divine body. Diwu Zhangzi explained. Disregarding everything else, the last sentence was true. Chu Luiwei thought about it, and this explanation seemed to make sense. Then, you should stay in Peach Blossom Cove during this period of time. It won't be too late for you to go after the dangerous period. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 2029. Seeing Diwu Zhangzi's insistence, Chu Luiwei had no choice but to agree. I'll wait for your news. Diwu Zhangzi secretly breathed a sigh of relief. During this period of time, you can prepare the things first. The old man is fine, but Lan Shao is a little troublesome. You know that he's always very picky about his face. If he wants to condense a divine body, he'll need a lot of things. Then he mentioned some of the herbs and other things that he needed. Chu Liuyue's eyebrows relaxed. Don't worry, Peach Blossom Dock has all these things. Diwu Zhangzi nodded in relief. Then it's settled. Chu Luiwei naturally agreed, but there was still one more tricky thing. Then, your aura. Even if he was a top powerhouse, such an aura still needed to be attached to something to be completely preserved. Since the Blood Heaven realm was gone, he had to find the next one as soon as possible. Diwu Zhangze waved his hand indifferently. It doesn't matter, as long as it's a venerable artifact. He knew that with Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu's wealth, they could still afford a venerable artifact. But that wasn't what Chu Luiwei was worried about. She hesitated for a moment, but still spoke. Senior Diwu, I have a lot of venerable artifacts here, but even if you can hide them, how will you return to the Red Moon Desert? The expression on Diwu Zhangze's face instantly froze. Obviously, he had also neglected this problem. He frowned as he felt a headache coming on. I'll escort you back. Rong Xiu's deep and pleasant voice sounded. Chu Luiwei and Diwu Zhangze looked at him at the same time. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. There shouldn't be a more suitable candidate than me. Senior Diwu, what do you think? Chu Luiwei immediately understood. That's right. Rong Xiu was now a venerable god powerhouse. Of course, he could go to the Red Moon Desert. Diwu Zhangze nodded immediately. Yes, you can go together. Chu Luiwei's anxious heart also relaxed. With Rong Xiu accompanying him, there shouldn't be any problems. If she wanted to go to the Red Moon Desert, she would have to either wait for the dangerous months to pass or break through to the god realm. In comparison, the former was easier to achieve. She had just condensed a divine body not long ago, and now she wanted to cross the threshold of the god realm. It was a bit exaggerated. As if seeing that she was still a little uneasy, Diwu Zhangze comforted her. Little you don't have to be too worried. With your talent, it won't be long before you become a god. He spoke with absolute certainty and sincerity. It was as if he could already see that day. Chu Luiwei couldn't help but smile. You really think highly of me. All along, De Bao and the others had been especially fond of her. At the same time, their expectations were also extremely high. In the eyes of others, there were many things that were impossible to do, but they seemed to think that she could do it. Of course, she did it all. Although she had suffered a lot in the process, now that she thought about it, she had indeed benefited a lot. She tilted her head and looked thoughtfully at Rong Xiu. Speaking of which, Rong Xiu's cultivation seemed to be very smooth. A few years ago, he had already broken through to the god realm and had 2 divine bodies. Not long ago, he directly broke through to the god realm in the god-slaying mound. The gap that was as difficult as climbing the sky for thousands of cultivators was easily crossed by him. Chu Luiwei had never seen Rong Xiu worry about cultivation. It seemed that he could break through as long as he wanted to. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiwei couldn't help but laugh. Rong Xiu asked with great interest. What are you laughing at? Chu Luiwei's eyes lit up. I'm thinking, now everyone says that I'm so talented that I can fight a god in the god realm. However, what they don't know is that compared to me, your talent is likely stronger, not weaker. She suddenly leaned closer and asked with a teasing smile. Your Highness, why do I feel that cultivation isn't that challenging for you at all? If I didn't know that you were dreaming, I would have thought that you could break through at will as long as you want. Diwu Zhangze looked up at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's smile deepened as he gently caressed her head. What are you talking about? Chu Luiwei was originally just joking, so she shrugged her shoulders and smiled. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed and looked at the sand table again. I wonder where Mo Shurqian escaped to this time. Chu Luiwei's heart sank when she heard this. Mo Shurqian's physical body had been destroyed, and only a soul was left. This was even more difficult to find. The world inside and outside the divine ruins was vast. Who knew what he would do next? She followed Rong Xiu's gaze and suddenly narrowed her eyes. She walked closer and saw that the originally flickering blood-red light on the destroyed mountain peak had already dimmed. There were some other spots next to it that were the same. The light was dim and there was no vitality. Mo Shurqian's cultivation should also be based on this sand table. Diwu Zhangze also walked over and said in a deep voice. To be precise, the entire Black Demon Cave is like this. Chu Luiwei recalled everything that had happened before and fell into deep thought. They set up xian formations everywhere and used various methods to lure those cultivators in. Finally, they devoured their power to increase their own cultivation? Diwu Zhangze nodded solemnly. That's right. Almost all of their power comes from this. Mobile users, Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 2030. Using this method to forcibly plunder the power of others could greatly increase the speed of cultivation and allow one to complete the breakthrough of various levels in an extremely short period of time. Compared to ordinary cultivation methods, this method was definitely a shortcut. This was also the usual method of the Black Demon Cave. Diu Zhangzi shook his head. Back then, only Mo Yao and a few others used this method. I didn't expect their entire sect to have fallen into the mire of greed. Chu Luiwei suddenly understood. This also explained her previous doubts. Using this method to cultivate, the experts of the Black Demon Cave emerged extremely quickly, but because they did not cultivate with their own true abilities, the power they obtained was mixed and modeled, and their combat strength was extremely weak. How could there be a shortcut on the path of cultivation? In order to expand their forces, the Black Demon Cave made everyone use this method to cultivate. Although it could greatly expand the sect in a short period of time, it was not a solution in the long run. For example, while there were many gods present today, only a few of them were actually capable of fighting. Once they encountered a powerful one, they would immediately be defeated. It was just a shell. What do you plan to do with those people outside? Diu Zhangzi asked. Mo Shiqian killed a group when he left, but there were still hundreds of people outside. Chu Luiwei looked at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled slightly. Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. After Chu Luiwei and the others entered the hall, everyone gathered together. Above the almost razed ruins, a red-gold flame burned brightly, like a wall, dividing the crowd into two parts. On one side was He Ziji and the others who came to participate in the trial, and on the other side were the remnants of the Black Demon Cave. At this time, they were all trapped in a transparent cage. Dumpling and Chang Wanzhou were in charge of guarding. Chang Wanzhou stood with his sword in his arms. His body was stained with a lot of blood, and he looked quite wretched. However, he stood straight as if he would never bend, and would not be defeated by any force. His delicate and beautiful face was indifferent and cold, without any expression. It was already evening. The afterglow of the sun shone on his body, and his soft golden short hair fluttered in the wind like a painting. Suddenly, Chang Wanzhou felt a small hand pulling at his clothes. Xiaozhou, Xiaozhou? He lowered his head. Dumpling was looking up at him curiously. What's up? Chang Wanzhou didn't want to say anything, but he remembered that Dumpling was Chu Luiwei's contracted magical beast, so he opened his mouth. His voice was as cold as ever. However, it wasn't the first day that Dumpling knew him, so she didn't mind. She grinned. Her grape-like eyes seemed to be glowing, dazzling and bright. Little Zhou, tell me, how did you recover so quickly? If she didn't sense it wrongly, Chang Wanzhou's injuries were already mostly healed. It was also because of this that Dumpling made up her mind to come over and ask for clarification. That's all you want to ask? Chang Wanzhou was a little surprised. Dumpling nodded quickly. She was really curious. One had to know that Chang Wanzhou had been seriously injured when he fought with Mo Shiqian. His external and internal injuries were quite serious. But it had only been 2 hours, and he was almost healed. Dumpling was a crimson-gold heavenly phoenix, and she had the purest bloodline. Her body was extremely resistant to beatings, and her recovery ability was unparalleled. There were very few people in the world who could compare to her. However, Chang Wanzhou was one of them. That was why she was particularly curious. Chang Wanzhou had always looked thin and weak on the surface. How could he? It's been like this since I became a great deity. Chang Wanzhou was silent for a moment before answering. Dumpling was stunned. That's it? That's it. Chang Wanzhou's answer was very boring, and it seemed that he had no intention of continuing to explain. Dumpling tugged at his clothes again and still refused to give up. Then, is it because your divine body is very powerful? I haven't condensed a divine body yet. Chang Wanzhou spoke, directly blocking Dumpling's remaining words. She smacked her lips and scratched her head. No divine body? Then, that shouldn't be. Chang Wanzhou wasn't a divine beast. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to recover so quickly. Moreover, his great deity strength seemed to be very strong. Dumpling raised her head again and stared at him for a long time, puzzled. Chang Wanzhou's expression was indifferent and he didn't say anything else. He really had nothing to say. Because what he said just now was the truth. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't notice the problem with his body. It was just that he had been thinking about Chu Luiwei before, so he didn't think too much about it. At this time, Tuanzi's words reminded him. But he didn't have an answer. Dumpling suddenly exclaimed in a low voice. "My hand is frozen." Chang Wanzhou lowered his head and saw that there was a thin layer of ice on her little hand. He frowned. Dumpling also raised her head and looked at him with a shocked expression. Just now, she only tugged at his clothes. And there was no ice on his body. How a reddish gold flame quickly burned, and the thin layer of ice quickly melted. This bit of cold air didn't pose a threat to Dumpling, but the reddish gold heavenly phoenix was an existence of the purest yang. Ordinary cold air couldn't cause her body to freeze. Dumpling suddenly thought of something and widened her eyes slightly. "The cold in your body." Before she could finish, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. It was Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu who had returned. Seeing Dumpling and Chang Wanzhou's expressions, Chu Luiwei was a little surprised. "What's wrong? What are you talking about?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.